Welcome, everyone, to Mythstorie, a podcast about myths and history. I am one of your hosts, Bryant, with my permanent guest, Cammy. Hey, Cammy.
Hey, Bryant.
What's going on? How you doing?
I am doing fantastic. How are you?
I'm well, too. I'm excited. We've got it's one of those topics that you're like, how did we not talk about this before? We're going to hit Jason and the Argonauts, which, have you seen the movie, the old movie?
I'm almost positive I have, but they some of them run together.
Yeah.
I'm sure I saw it in like Latin class or something. Is that the one where they're rowing and then like Hercules is rowing on one side and they're all rowing and he's faster than them? Or
I
is
don't
that
know,
like
maybe.
Spartacus or something? I
That's
don't
the
know.
thing. Like the Jason and the Argonauts, like it seems like I've heard it way more than I've like seen it, but I almost felt like I'd seen it just from hearing about it so much. I couldn't even have told you, Jason, it was, in the Golden Fleece. I don't know. It's so weird. Like it's crazy to think about because I felt like I knew it, but then our research has shown me that I really didn't know it, or I haven't seen the film, haven't read anything, but it's like almost as like famous as Hercules in a way, especially like with the movie. Um, very very famous Greek myth, and it was fun to learn about it because while it is an old story, it seems more like that it got refined a lot later than some of the other
Yeah,
stories did.
I'm sure you'll go over it, but I feel there was like a children's writer that rewrote it, right?
Oh, possibly. Yeah, there was like a couple guys in the last like 250 years that touched upon it. What was it? Graves and Lampreyre. I'll talk about them a little bit, but yeah, they were like modern English scholars or poets or authors that talked about it. Um,
I
that was
remember
really
having
interesting.
a book that my dad was a principal for an alternative school.
Hmm.
And so they didn't have a proper library, sort of
Oh
like
yeah.
Florida right now. And they were bringing in books like that were kind of donated so that they would have like a collection for the students. And I remember that the book the books that were donated, all the spines, or not the spines, but like the cover would be cut like maybe like a quarter of an inch off of
Hmm.
it. Well, the paperbacks anyway, not the hardbacks. And so they had like a lot of books like that. And when they were going through the library, if they had any duplicates, they were selling them stuff. And so I bought a copy of, it was either Jason and the Golden Fleece or Jason and the Argonauts, and I'm not sure which one.
Hmm. That makes
And I remember
sense.
just loving the story.
Yeah, I bet. And Hercules was a member of the Argonauts, so yes, yeah, it might be that for sure.
Yeah, I
I just
couldn't remember
realized
because that's in the story, like him rowing on
you
one
just imagine
side.
it would. That'd be like saying like Robin and the Batman. I don't know, like be like, wait, well, let's put the one guy forward.
Right.
Well, anyway, yeah. So I'll talk a little bit about that. But as you know, on Mythstorie, we talk, get a little story, and then we'll talk about it afterwards. So Cammy will take us away with her original story, her epic poem. Please proceed, Cammy.
So I use the Argonautica of Apollonius, and I use the argonaut/book.com, which does have all four books on it. Our hero, having lost his sandal in the depths of the flooded mire, came upon the land of Iolcus, where his father once ruled. His uncle was holding a feast to celebrate his own father, the sea god Poseidon. But Peleus, having heard the oracle's warning of being killed by a man with one sandal, quickly sent his nephew on a voyage to retrieve the golden fleece of legend. Jason brought with him the sons of gods and heroes and well skilled men who knew a ship and knew a quest and who would ensure their safe return. Even Hercules joined them. They called on Apollo to bless their voyage and sacrificed 2 steers to him, and each man boarded the Argo eager for the journey. Smooth they sailed until they came upon the land of Lemnos, where the women had long killed their husbands and assumed the dress of war for their hatred of Thrace. And seeing the Argo, they thought the Thracians were upon them and rushed to the beach, braced for battle. But Jason sent their herald, son of Hermes, to deliver the message of their quest. And seeing him approach, the women formed a council to decide what would become of the strangers, for no one knew of their foul deed. The women decided in haste to invite the men in for festivities and sacrifice to the gods, to hide their deeds in merriment and wine. And so they did. And this worked, for the men did not question the women when they said their men had shipped to Thrace to toil in the fields there, and the heroes enjoyed their night and went to the ship at first light to continue on their journey. And through their travel, they passed lands where men with 6 arms who threw great boulders in war lived, and brilliant mountains which called them to stay. Polyphemus answered this call. Hercules they lost to his labors, for he was to sit at the table of the gods, yet they still sailed to their glory. Finally, after weeks of rough winds and harpies and hostile cities, the men arrived at Colchis, the home of the fleece. Athena and Hera plot to enlist the help of Aphrodite and her insolent son Eros, and they bribe the boy with a bright throwing toy that leaves behind a sparkle of a shooting star, and he gladly finds Medea and pierces her with his arrow just as Jason approaches the city wall with his men. She falls madly for him and insists that she will help him gain his fleece, for she is a powerful sorceress. She begs for her father to let go the fleece to return home, and he, reluctant and fearful for his throne, sends Jason on an impossible task. He must plow the fields of Ares with fire-breathing oxen, and then sow rows of dragon's teeth in the freshly plowed field, then fight the bone guards who pop up from the rows. He accepted the challenge and went away to prepare for the next morning's task. Medea met her love and handed him a potion that would give him strength to wrangle the oxen. Jason woke the next morning sweating and nervous, but he took the draught of Medea and his nerves steadied. Then he took on the task at hand, effortlessly taming the fire oxen and plowing the fields, then sowing the teeth. Soon the dragon-toothed soldiers popped from the earth like seeds sprouting, but Jason, with the aid of a boulder, destroyed them easily. And once the army was defeated, he made haste to the king for his reward, but he refused to hand it over. Again, Medea aided Jason and put the serpent guarding the fleece to sleep so that he may sneak and grab it. And he rushed back to the Argo and urged his men to sail at full speed away from the treacherous king's land. But with the king's full fleet and force to find him, it was only a few days before the ship was cornered. And though their leader was the brother of Medea, he wanted her slain for her deeds. Medea, with the help of Jason, murdered him, and they were able to outsmart the leaderless fleet into staying along the coast of the Danube. But Zeus was wary of Jason's inhumanity and forced him to sail endlessly until he was able to cure himself of his sins. So on their travels, Medea and Jason came upon Circe, who washed the blood from their hands and restored their humanity. And then they sailed again for home. But they were too far off course, and the men carried their ship across the desert to find water fit for sailing. And after 12 days, Triton himself opened the sea for the men to sail home.
Nice. Yeah. Thanks, Hercules. Just
Right.
going AFK.
Just
Not
leaving us
busy.
there.
Don't need you there. I think a big part of like why I never why I disregarded it is because Jason. Like that's like
such a normal
David
name.
and
Right.
the Argonauts. Yeah, and you're just like, I don't care about some dudes in the 60s going on a boat. Like, what are you talking about? And I, like the ancient Greek could be something like Iason.
Yeah, his father was Aeson.
Yeah, yeah, that's right, Aeson, and his would be more like Yason or something like that. So it would sound much better than that. But yeah, when you hear, I mean, like, 'cause you got like Heracles, or it would be Heracles, Hercules right there. You got all these other. Hold on, what are their names? Their names are amazing.
I'm pretty sure Castor and
Acastus,
Pollux were on there. And
Admetus, Atalanta, Aegus, Euphemus, all these Idas, Idmun, Philoctetes, Telamon, Typhus, like Jason. I lead these guys, I guess. So yeah, that is kind of like, but again, it kind of shows how popular it was, and then we can probably help blame some of the later English dudes that butchered it and brought it to the film in the 60s and stuff like that, and they just straight up went with Jason. So I wonder how popular the name was before that. In
like
the
just to name
English
people?
speaking world, yeah, in the Western world. It seems like it was fairly popular in other places, Eastern, just kind of a normal name, but just curious about that. I thought that'd be interesting. But yeah, Jason's a pretty old title. There's a website, Jason Colavito is an author who's written on it, probably because he shares the name and he's just like, yeah, I got to support other Jasons. He has a great website though that was used by a lot of other sources. And he claims that it's been talked about since the Mycenaean era, so that's 1200 BCE, so quite a while. Probably, I couldn't specifically find something. Theoi had a few articles just summarizing Jason in general, nothing like that I couldn't find anywhere else. But I'm sure that there's old, like frescoes or pottery that depict Jason, and that's probably where we get that story,
You
just like we
know,
do a lot.
since you mentioned that, the pottery thing,
Hmm.
I noticed a lot when I was doing the research to like just figure out which source I was going to use. They used Odysseus. I think
Mm,
because the stories are pretty similar, but
yeah.
they used Odysseus's stuff to like depict Jason. It was kind of weird in a lot
Oh,
of it. Yeah,
meta.
yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, so it is quite an older story, but Apollonius, I was telling you how to say the name. Apollonius is kind of the first guy who seems to have like gotten his ducks in a row with like same way as Homer getting everything else, and wrote the Argonautica, which Argos was the maker of the boat, um, and Nautica is like of the sea, nautical, astronaut. So Argonautica was a poem, and Apollonius was around during the 3rd century BCE, in Alexandria. It was a famous Greek poet, and then later we would have Apollodorus, which is the pseudo compendium thing. In the 1st to 2nd century, which referenced it, and then Valerius, 1st century Roman poet. Several others would later like talk about it, but Apollonius seems to be the earliest source that we have, a written source that we have in the same way that we did, who wrote the poem as we know it. The tragedy of Medea, though, was first written in 431 BC. Um, so that was an interesting take. That was written by, oh man, oh, I had it. Someone we know. Hold on, I'll find it. Um, Someone who we mention all the time. I have Artemis Attack in my hand as I'm trying to look. Um, but Yeah, so it's important to note that the setting of the Argonauts in Jason's exploits is before the Trojan War, which
Okay.
is pretty cool to think about because I always the show in our research I like to be more mindful of timelines and when things were supposed to happen and things like that, and solidifying when the Trojan War was, when Homer told his stories and was around. Um, so yeah, the Trojan War was, we kind of suppose, if it was real, was around 1300 BC, and the other Jason from the website, he claimed that the Mycenaean era, which was 1200 BC, so maybe the Trojan War happened 100 years after we have Mycenaean pottery or whatever the source was that he came across, depicts Jason's story. So it could be a real guy. Could have been someone who was involved in famous stories. I mean, Hercules is involved in here, and his exploits go deep,
Yeah,
very, very
we
deep.
spoke about that before. I do think that that's really interesting that Jason was before Odysseus because I mean, you gotta think about it, like his name. So
Yeah,
yeah, of course you forget about Jason after you hear about Odysseus.
yeah, Odysseus. Ooh, yeah, I know, and yeah, I think it's like when you compile these works and how well that they spread, and I think like Hercules, I think was just Heracles was just the name that spread so well, and just like, he didn't quite. I mean, I guess he was revered as a god, but he was more mortal, I think, than anyone else. He was more like graspable, and um, the shrines to Hercules, the references to him from Spain all the way to India, that like it's just wild. Jason, yeah, it just doesn't quite ring a bell. They were like, I guess like Alexander's group was in India talking about Hercules, and they're like, nice, and we got this guy Jason, and they were like, Jason, I don't know, Hercules, let's just stick with him. But it is really interesting
No
to
offense to
see.
any Jasons that listen to
No
this. We're
offense,
talking about ancient stuff.
absolutely, yeah,
Don't worry.
ancient Jasons, yeah. Um, but yeah, so it was interesting to see, and Jason, like in the exploits too, uh the father of Achilles is involved with Jason. So there's a really cool like tie-in in cinematic universe of Greek mythology or Greek history.
It
Greek
felt
mythology.
almost like fan fiction because it was like,
Yeah,
and so was there, and so was there, and they're gonna do
right.
this.
Yeah, and that's I think like Hercules, the stories do a really good job of like not feeling like fan fiction, but this certainly does in a lot of ways. And like Iphicles, it wasn't Iphicles involved,
I
uh,
don't remember that. I
not with
actually
the Argonauts.
so when I was reading the first book,
Sure.
it just went, it was just a list, just name after name after name
Right.
and whose son they were, and then it was like Hermes' son's there, cool. The rest of them, like, do
Yeah.
I know who you are?
Right. Yeah. It doesn't look like Iphicles was involved. He did something else. Um, but it is kind of cool to see. There's an I think he was an Italian professor, or he's an American professor named Livio Stecchini, and he actually posited that the voyages of the mythical geography of the voyage of the Argonauts was connected to specific locations. Um, these theories weren't really adopted, but it was like a cool euhemeristic idea of like trying to make sense of what ancient sources were referencing and the geography and locations and things like that. So yeah, this is a pretty self-contained thing, quite epic. Was uh in like we have paintings from 1901 that depict Jason, um or sorry, 1907, by John Waterhouse, a beautiful painting by of Jason and Medea. There are references to him, like kind of throughout the Middle Ages, the late Middle Ages, so 16th, 17th century. Jason and Medea, it's them. Dante in the Inferno references Jason. He's actually in I think the seventh or eighth circle, the same as like adulterers, I want to say, likely because of his adultering. Um,
Sure is cheating past.
right. And so he was important enough to be referenced, and I guess because he is like a mortal guy, uh, it kind of keeps him away. Like I don't know if Dante put Hercules anywhere. I don't think he's gonna touch that. He's just like, no, I'm good. All right, well, you're good, bud. Don't worry about it. I won't mention you.
Well, he's
But
already feasting with the gods, so unless the
right,
gods are there.
right, and yeah, the stories are great though. They just seem like kind of straightforward, simple stories, not as convoluted and difficult to interpret sometimes as other Greek legends, but Apollonius really nailed it with his poem, and then other sources used it. You can find on Project Gutenberg the Argonautica, a 1997 text translation. Or sorry, it was a translator from named Robert Cooper Seton, who died in 1915. The text became available. This version became available in 1997. Now it's online, free for anyone to read on there through. So just look up the Argonautica and Project Gutenberg, and you can find it and read it in several different formats. So I thought that was really interesting to see that. Yeah, it seems like it was important enough. And then yeah, this film became a big deal. It seems to have done quite well.
When was the film? The 70s or 60s?
63.
That makes
Yes,
sense. I feel like they made
1963.
all those movies in like the 60s.
Oh my God. Yeah, they were really trying to do it.
What did they call it? The sandal, sword and sandal. What did they
Yes,
call it?
yeah.
Something like
I
that.
think it is Sword and Sandal. That's a good point. Sword and Sandal, that is 100% it. The Sword and Sandal or peplum subgenre, largely Italian made historical, mythological, or biblical epics. So yeah, that's pretty interesting. There was a miniseries too in 2000 called Jason and the Argonauts that looks interesting.
Who did it?
Jason London.
Well, of course, another Jason. But
Oh, oh.
I mean, who distributed it? I guess
It
was it
was
HBO or
NBC,
NBC?
directed by
Okay,
Nick
so
Willing.
less interested.
It had
Cool.
some famous people in there. It looks all right. Yeah, I don't know. 2000s. I don't know. I don't know if I could watch that. But and then Rick Riordan of the Percy Jackson fame, he started another series that took place kind of like afterwards, although it's kind of separate, called The Heroes of Olympus, and it seems like Jason is featured in that very regularly. So, which is cool. I thought that was it's nice to see that this story it seems very malleable because of kind of how simple it is, and so a lot of people can easily just kind of jump in and do whatever they need to with it. So one funny final note was that there was a cartoon based off the Disney Hercules film,
Mhm.
and there was an episode where Hercules, it was Hercules and the Argonauts is the episode, I believe, and William Shatner voiced Jason.
Of course.
So that was great. Which is Phil was an Argonaut. I can't say his name, but the Phil that was the satyr.
Danny DeVito's character, yeah.
Yes, was a member of the Argonauts, and in the episode too, they made allusions. Philoctetes.
Oh yeah, okay.
Philoctetes. He was in the episode. They like make allusions to Jason being trained by Phil and stuff, but Phil was an Argonaut. So yeah, fun connections there. I thought that was nice to see, but that's kind of it. So Jason the Argonauts, you can read it. The poem in prose is available online. Project Gutenberg. The 1963 film is there. Probably not too bad. Probably fun. Probably not a good miniseries from the 2000s, but we'll see. Let us know if you have seen it. I'd love to hear about it. I couldn't have even guessed that it existed. I have to ask my mom. She might have watched it. She would have watched that back then. She would have. But yeah, Cammy, I think that was a great summation of the story. And
Thank
yeah,
you.
thanks, Apollonius, for taking the time to write this down 2000 something years ago. So I think that covers it, Cammy. A quick little note. We're going to, some things might be changing. We're going to go to 2 episodes a month now, once every other week. And we're still kind of hitting some of the older episodes. I think we're actually going to redo Hercules soon too. I wanted to tell you about that off air, but I'll tell you now.
Wow, surprise! Yay!
Yeah, because we that was an early one we covered, and you may know I told everyone we recently I took a lot of the older episodes off just because of how rough the quality was, sound quality. So we're gonna redo some of the old ones so that way they sound and look like this. So everyone, thanks for joining us. Like things and subscribe things. Mythstorie.net will show you all of our links, and that's about it, right, Cammy? Got any
Absolutely.
golden fleeces to show to the camera?
I do have one thing that I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah.
When I was reading the story, it reminded me a lot of like every other myth, like
Sure.
with the the ideas of like harpies and the lotus eaters, like
Apollonius had a
so
Mad
things
Lib.
keeping you back from going
Yeah.
and it's almost the exact same things. Like the island of women, they actually stayed there for several days until Hercules is like, look guys, we're on a quest here.
Apollonius was just like a penny. What do they call those English like cheap comics from the just throw. He was like yeah. You just, it was a Mad Lib of heroes, and you just like fill in an island of women, and the monster attacked the harpies. Yeah, you just fill in the blanks and then sell it for whatever Greek gold you can get, and you get your wine, and you're good to go. So Apollonius wasn't even talented. He just no, that's not true. I think that is great. Yeah, it's interesting. Jace, it has like a peculiar sense to it, not necessarily in a good way, not in a bad way, but it stands out, but you're not like, I like you. You're just like, why are you standing out? get back there.
Here's this thing I read.
Right. All right, everyone. Well, as always, thanks for joining us. Let us know if you have any suggestions. Mythstorie with an IE, all one word. Our Facebook group's a great way to get in touch with Cammy or myself. That's it. All right, everyone. We will see you next time.
Oh. The Argo.
God, that went on way longer than I thought.